Moscow, Idaho. Population 13,000. A small college town nestled in the rolling hills of the Palouse region. Where everyone knows everyone. Where students walk home late at night without fear. Where the biggest concerns are midterm exams, football games, and what's for dinner. It was the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened until November 13th, 2022. Pandemic. In a white 3-story house on King Road, 1022. King Road. 4 young people, full of life, full of dreams, full of potential, were sleeping peacefully. It was a Sunday morning. Just after 4 the house was quiet. The neighborhood was dark. And somewhere in that darkness, a predator was approaching. By sunrise, 4 lives would be gone, stabbed to death in their sleep, in one of the most brutal crime scenes investigators had ever witnessed. The murders would shock the nation, paralyze a community, and launch one of the most intense manhunts in recent American history. But here's what made this case truly chilling. Tiller wasn't some random stranger. He was a graduate student studying criminology, the science of understanding criminal behavior. He'd spent years learning how criminals think, how they operate, how they get caught, and he believed he could commit the perfect crime. This is the story of the Idaho Student Murders, a case that captivated America for weeks, where the hunter became the hunted, where cutting-edge technology met old-fashioned detective work, and where a man who thought he understood crime better than anyone discovered that understanding and getting away with it are 2 very different things. Before we talk about death, we need to talk about life, because these weren't just victims. They were people with families, friends, dreams, futures that were stolen from them. Kaylee Goncalves, 21 years old, senior at University of Idaho, majoring in general studies, planning to move to Texas after graduation. She'd just gotten a job in Austin. Her whole life was ahead of her. She was smart, ambitious, loved by everyone who knew her. Her best friend since 6th grade was Madison Mogen. Madison Mogen. Also 21. Also a senior, majoring in marketing. Maddie and Kaylee were inseparable. They'd gotten an apartment together after graduation. They were going to move to Austin together, start their careers together, build their lives together. They were more than best friends. They were sisters. Xana Kernodle. She's danger. Dia Tennessee. 20 years old. Junior. Marketing major. She was in a relationship with Chapin. They'd been dating for over a year. Young love. The kind where you finish each other's sentences. Where you can't imagine life without the other person. Xana was vibrant, creative, full of energy. Always smiling. Chapin, 20 years old. Freshman. Originally from Mount Vernon, Washington. Member of the Sigma Chi fraternity. He was studying recreation, sport, and tourism management. He was Xana's boyfriend. But that night, he was just staying over. He wasn't even supposed to be there. Wrong place, wrong time. A life ended before it truly began. 4 young people, 4 bright futures, 4 families that would never be whole again. On the night of November 12th, 2020, they were just college kids, doing college things, going out with friends, coming home late, looking forward to the next day. They had no idea that someone was watching, someone was planning, someone had decided that they would be his victims. Saturday night, November 12th, 2022. And a typical weekend night in a college town. Students out at bars, parties, enjoying their youth. Kaylee and Maddie went to the Corner Club, a local sports bar. They were seen on surveillance footage, laughing, having fun, living life. They left around 1:30 a.m. From there, they went to the Grub Truck, a food truck near campus. Security cameras captured them ordering food. Around 1:40 a.m., smiling, carefree. In the video, you can see them just being normal college kids, hungry after a night out. They had no idea these would be some of the last images of them alive. By 1:56 a.m., Kaylee and Maddie were home, 122 King Road. Meanwhile, Xana and Ethan had been at a Sigma Chi party. They returned home around 1:45 a.m. Stopped at a food truck on the way. Also captured on camera. Also smiling. Also unaware of what was coming. The house on King Road was a typical college rental. 3 stories, 6 bedrooms, 6 students living there. On the first floor, Bethany Funke and Dylan Mortensen. On the second floor, Maddie and Xana. On the third floor, Kaylee. By 2 a.m., everyone was home. The house was settling in for the night. Doors were locked. Lights were going off. Sleep was coming. But someone else was also approaching. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's house would later show a white Hyundai Elantra driving slowly through the neighborhood. Around 3:29 a.m., it appeared on King Road. It circled the area multiple times, pausing, watching. The driver was looking for something or someone, and at approximately 4 a.m., he found it. What happened next in that house, in those dark early morning hours, is almost too horrific to describe. Someone entered the house, moved silently through the rooms, and with a large knife, attacked 4 sleeping students. The coroner would later determine the victims were stabbed multiple times. Some had defensive wounds. They tried to fight back, but it was dark. They were disoriented, and the attack was swift and brutal. 2 roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke, on the first floor, survived. They heard noises. Dylan would later testify she opened her door and saw a figure, dressed in black, wearing a mask, walking toward the back door. She was frozen in fear. She locked her door and hid, terrified, until morning. November 13th, 2022. Sibersal Demasi. No. Once the surviving roommates woke up. The house was eerily quiet. They called friends, asked them to come over. Something felt wrong, but they didn't know what. Didn't want to check. When the friends arrived, they went upstairs and found a scene of unimaginable horror. At 11:58 a.m., a 911 call was made from a roommate's phone, reporting an unconscious person. The operator asked questions, but the caller couldn't explain, couldn't process what they were seeing. Police arrived at 12:00 p.m. Within minutes, they knew this wasn't just a medical emergency. This was a massacre. Officers entered the house. On the second floor, they found Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin. On the third floor, Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves, all four, had been stabbed to death. The coroner would later describe the wounds as sharp force injuries. The murder weapon was believed to be a large fixed blade knife, 7 to 8 inches long, the kind used for hunting. By 1 p.m., King Road was a crime scene. Yellow tape everywhere. Police vehicles. News crews starting to gather. By evening, the story had gone national. 4 University of Idaho students murdered in their home. No suspect, no motive, no weapon. The community was terrified. Parents called their kids. Students left campus, and everyone asked the same question. Who could do this? The Moscow Police Department. Population 25,000. Yes. Mian. No. The air. They'd never seen anything like this. They called in the Idaho State Police, the FBI, behavioral analysts, forensic experts. This was the biggest case in Idaho history, and the pressure was enormous. Every parent in America with a college-age child was watching, waiting, demanding answers. Kai debondientes. Days turned into weeks, and the police had nothing. No suspects, no arrests, no clear motive. They held press conferences, saying they were following leads. But to the public, it felt like they were getting nowhere. The frustration was palpable, and the fear was growing. The crime scene was complex. 6 people lived in that house. Dozens of friends had been there recently. DNA evidence was everywhere. But whose DNA mattered? Who was a visitor and who was a killer? The investigators processed hundreds of tips, interviewed thousands of people, reviewed countless hours of surveillance footage. They were drowning in information, but starving for the right lead. Early on, there were persons of interest. A man seen on the grub truck footage, talking to Kaylee and Maddie. Police cleared him. An ex-boyfriend of Kaylee's. Police cleared him too. An unhoused man in the area. Also cleared. Every day without an arrest. The community grew more anxious. Social media erupted with theories. Amateur sleuths pointed fingers. Innocent people had their lives destroyed by speculation. But behind the scenes, investigators were making progress. They had something critical, something that would eventually crack the case wide open. On surveillance footage from a nearby home, they'd spotted that white Hyundai Elantra circling the area around the time of the murders. It appeared at 3:29 a.m. and left around 4:20 a.m. right in the window of the murders. The FBI put out a nationwide alert. White Hyundai Elantra, 2011 to 2013 model. If you own one, if you saw one, contact police. They began searching DMV records across the entire region. There were thousands of white Elantras, but they had other evidence too. Touched Dia, left on a knife sheath, found at the crime scene, next to one of the victims. The killer had made a mistake, a small mistake, but it would be fatal to his plan. They also used something revolutionary, genetic genealogy, the same technology that caught the Golden State Killer. They took the DNA from the knife sheath, ran it through public genealogy databases, and started building a family tree, cousin by cousin, relative by relative, until finally they had a name: Bryan Christopher Kohberger. Jason Sunday. Christopher Kohberger? Bryan Christopher Kohberger. Born November 21st, 1994. Etienne Beben Ayabam. Desi Ye Chai Isimfio. 28 years old at the time of the murders. He grew up in Pennsylvania. Quiet kid. Struggled with weight as a teenager. Reportedly bullied in high school. He was described as awkward, a loner, someone who didn't quite fit in. But Bryan was smart, very smart. He earned a bachelor's degree, then a master's degree in criminal justice from DeSales University in Pennsylvania. His thesis? On how criminals get caught. He was particularly interested in the psychology of crime. What drives people to kill, how they select victims, how they avoid detection. In August 2022, Onijagawa, Ardsey, they up to stay. Just 3 months before the murders, Bryan moved to Washington State to pursue a PhD in criminology at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington, just 10 miles from Moscow, Idaho. 10 miles from 1122 King Road. He was a teaching assistant, helping undergraduates learn about criminal behavior, all while planning his own crime. According to later reports, Bryan had changed. In the year before the murders, he'd lost weight, started working out, became more confident, but also more arrogant. Teaching assistants who worked with him said he was condescending, thought he was smarter than everyone. Professors noticed he asked unusual questions about crime scenes, about forensic evidence, about how killers get caught. Questions that now, in hindsight, seemed sinister. But here's what sealed his fate. Bryan owned a white Hyundai Elantra, a 2015 model. And his phone placed him near the crime scene at least 12 times. Before the murders, he'd been driving through that neighborhood, past that house, repeatedly, in the weeks leading up to November 13th, casing the location, studying the patterns, planning every single detail. On the night of the murders, Bryan's phone went silent around 2:47 a.m. It didn't ping any cell towers for hours. He'd turned it off or put it in airplane mode, a classic move to avoid being tracked. But what he didn't know was that surveillance cameras would capture his car anyway, and that one tiny piece of DNA on a knife sheath would place him inside that house. December 30th, 2022. May Newell 3 Darrow Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. A SWAT team surrounded a small house. Inside, Bryan Kohberger was asleep, or maybe he was awake, waiting, knowing that eventually they would come for him. The arrest was swift, professional, no resistance. Bryan was taken into custody, charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. The news broke within hours, and the nation exhaled. 7 weeks of terror, 7 weeks of wondering were over. They had him at a press conference. Prosecutors laid out the case. The white Elantra, captured on camera multiple times. The cell phone records showing him near the scene. The DNA on the knife sheath, a nearly perfect match. And the fact that his phone went dark during the exact window of the murders, then pinged back online just as he was leaving the area. But the most chilling evidence came from Dylan Mortensen, the surviving roommate, who'd opened her door around 4:00 am and saw a figure 6 feet tall, athletic build, wearing black clothing, bushy eyebrows, walking toward the back door. She described him as confident. He walked past her, didn't say a word, just left like he'd finished his work. Bryan Kohberger. Madison Mogen, 6 foot, athletic build, distinctive bushy eyebrows. The description matched perfectly. Police also searched Bryan's apartment and his parents' home in Pennsylvania. They found cleaning supplies. His car had been meticulously cleaned, inside and out, but they didn't find the murder weapon. The knife was never recovered. To this day, it remains missing, likely disposed of somewhere between Idaho and Pennsylvania. Here's another detail. After the murders, Bryan drove home to Pennsylvania for winter break with his father. A cross-country road trip, 2,500 miles, in a car that may have contained evidence of 4 murders. Imagine being his father, making that drive, not knowing that your son was a killer. The question everyone wants answered. Why? Why would a PhD student studying criminology murder 4 people he didn't know? What was the motive? Prosecutors have been careful not to reveal a definitive motive, but several theories have emerged. Theory 1. He was obsessed with one of the victims. Some reports suggested Bryan had followed Kaylee and Maddie on social media, had messaged one of them on Instagram multiple times, but received no response. Was this a case of obsession, rejection, and rage. Theory 2. He wanted to commit the perfect crime. Bryan had spent years studying criminals, understanding how they think, how they operate, how they get caught. Some criminologists believe he may have wanted to test his knowledge, to prove he was smarter than the criminals he studied, to show that he could get away with murder. Theory 3. He was a developing serial killer. The brutality of the crime, the stalking behavior beforehand, the lack of clear personal connection to the victims, all suggest this might not have been his endpoint. If he'd succeeded, if he'd gotten away with it, would there have been more victims? More murders? The FBI believes this had the hallmarks of someone who could kill again. After his arrest, investigators discovered that Bryan had posted a survey online months before the murders, asking criminals about their crimes. How did you choose your victim? What time of day did you commit the crime? How did you feel afterwards? Was this research for his PhD? Or was he gathering information for his own crime? The truth is, we may never fully understand why Bryan Kohberger chose to murder 4 innocent people. Evil rarely makes sense to those of us who live in the light. But one thing is certain. He thought he was smarter than everyone. He thought he could commit the perfect crime. He thought his knowledge of criminology would protect him. He was wrong. As of now, Bryan Kohberger awaits trial in Latah County, Idaho. The trial has been delayed multiple times. Most recently, it's scheduled for 2025. The prosecution is seeking the death penalty. Bryan has pleaded not guilty. His defense team argues the evidence is circumstantial. That DNA on a knife sheath doesn't prove he was the killer. That his car being in the area doesn't prove anything. Bryan's lawyers have filed numerous motions challenging the surveillance evidence, questioning the genetic genealogy methods, arguing that the massive media coverage has tainted the jury pool. They've requested a change of venue, out of Idaho entirely. The defense has an uphill battle, but they only need one juror to have reasonable doubt. The families of the victims have been waiting for justice, for answers, for closure. Kaylee Goncalves' father has been outspoken, demanding transparency. Frustrated by delays, he said, "These kids were butchered, and we're supposed to wait years for a trial." The pain in his voice is unbearable. Moscow, Idaho, will never be the same. The White House at 1122 King Road was demolished in December 2023. The university bought the property and tore it down. Too many terrible memories, too much pain. Students still walk past where it stood and remember that night. That changed everything. The University of Idaho made significant changes. More security cameras, better lighting, enhanced police presence, but the sense of safety, that small-town innocence, that feeling that nothing bad could happen here, that's gone forever. This case raised important questions about surveillance, about privacy, about genetic genealogy. Was it ethical to use public DNA databases to solve crimes? Most people say yes when it catches a killer. But what about privacy rights? What about the precedent it sets? These are questions we're still grappling with. Bryan Kohberger studied crime, understood crime, thought he could outsmart crime. But in the end, he became exactly what he studied, a case study in criminal psychology. A cautionary tale about arrogance, about evil, and about the consequences of believing you're smarter than everyone else. There's a profound irony here. Bryan spent years learning how criminals get caught. He knew about DNA evidence, cell phone tracking, surveillance cameras. He knew all the mistakes that trip up killers, and yet he made those exact mistakes. He left DNA at the scene. His phone placed him there. His car was captured on camera. For all his study, for all his knowledge, he couldn't escape the basic truth that criminals almost always get caught. But this isn't a story about the criminal. It's a story about 4 young people whose lives were stolen. Kaylee Goncalves, who loved her dog Murphy and dreamed of a marketing career in Texas. Madison Mogen, who wanted to travel the world and make a difference. Xana Kernodle, who was an artist, creative and vibrant, full of life. And Chapin, who was just starting his college journey. All that potential, all those dreams, all those futures, gone in one night of unspeakable violence. 4 families will never be whole again. Parents who will never see their children graduate, never see them get married, never hold their grandchildren. Siblings who lost their best friends, friends who lost their confidants, a community that lost its innocence. The ripple effects of Bryan's actions will be felt for generations. If there's a lesson in this tragedy, it's that evil exists, even in the safest places, even in small towns, even among those who seem normal. Bryan Kohberger wasn't a monster from a horror movie. He was a graduate student, someone who sat in classrooms, graded papers, lived an ordinary life, and that makes him all the more terrifying. Because if he could do this, then evil can come from anywhere. The criminology student who became a killer thought he understood crime, but he didn't understand the most important truth, that justice eventually finds everyone. Technology advances, evidence doesn't lie, and investigators never stop searching for the truth. Bryan Kohberger wanted to be known for his intellect, for his research, for his understanding of crime. Instead, he'll be remembered as a coward who murdered 4 defenseless people in their sleep, as a cautionary tale about arrogance and evil, and as proof that no matter how smart you think you are, you can't outrun your own conscience. and you can't escape. Justice. 4 young lives taken too soon by someone who thought he was above the law. But in the end, the law always wins, and their memories will outlive his legacy of violence. Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, DMC, Ethan Chapin. May they rest in peace, and may justice finally be served.